In 1946, a sharecropper's widow in the Tennessee Hill Country kept 7 children fed through a February ice storm on a half-bushel of dried corn, a cured ham hock, and 7 jars of things she'd put up the summer before. She didn't call it resourcefulness. She called it Thursday. Her grandchildren are still here because of meals like the ones on this list. Today, a Brooklyn restaurant charges $28 for a small crock of something they found in a 1930s church cookbook and renamed Heritage Grain Porridge. The woman who invented that dish had dirt under her fingernails and a wood stove she fed before she fed her children. Number 1 on this list was the meal that mountain midwives brought to a new mother when there was nothing else in the house. Number 49 was so simple that farmhands made it with 3 ingredients in a tin can over an open fire, and it kept grown men working from sunup to dark. Number 58 has been completely forgotten by everyone except a handful of women in their 80s in 3 counties in East Tennessee, and when they are gone, it is gone with them. Hit that subscribe button. These are 60 forgotten Appalachian and farmland poor man's meals that kept mountain families alive. We are going to count every single one of them, starting from the meal that held families together on the leanest nights and building all the way to the one dish that mountain people themselves named first when asked what kept them alive. By the time we reach number 60, you are going to understand something about American food that nobody is teaching anymore. These were not simple meals made by simple people. These were precise, intelligent solutions to the hardest problem a human being faces. How do you keep the people you love alive when you have almost nothing? The answer starts right now.
Number 1. Spoon bread. Spoon bread was the glow-up nobody saw coming. Born in the backwoods of Virginia and Kentucky, this dish took plain cornmeal and turned it into something soft, airy, and downright classy by mountain standards. Cooks would slowly whisk cornmeal into boiling milk until it thickened into a heavy mush. Didn't look promising at first. Then came the upgrade. Beaten eggs folded in gently, a pat of butter if you had it, maybe a pinch of baking powder. Into a hot oven it went, and what came out was pure surprise. Golden on top, custardy underneath, so tender you couldn't cut it. You had to scoop it with a spoon. This was Sunday food. Church supper food. Preacher is coming food. Serving spoon bread meant you were doing all right. At least for one night. Number 2. Skilly skillet beans. Skilly skillet beans were pure mountain fuel, no frills and no apologies. This was breakfast or supper when you had a long, brutal day of work ahead and needed something that would stick with you till dark. Dried beans got soaked overnight, then dumped into a cast iron skillet come morning with whatever pork you had, salt pork, bacon scraps, ham bits, even just grease if times were lean. Onions went in next, chopped roughly, followed by a splash of water or leftover pot liquor. Everything simmered slowly until the beans started breaking down and turning creamy, soaking up all that smoky fat. The result was thick, rich, and heavy, meant to be eaten straight from the skillet with corn pone or biscuits used like a spoon. It wasn't pretty, but it powered coal miners, loggers, and farmers through 10-hour days without blinking. Number 3. Red-eye gravy. Red-eye gravy is one of those hillbilly inventions that sounds downright wrong until you taste it. This thin, coffee-spiked gravy came straight out of the waste-nothing kitchens of the rural South. After frying slabs of salty country ham in a cast-iron skillet, cooks didn't toss the drippings. Instead, they poured in strong black coffee, yesterday's brew if that's what was on hand. The skillet hissed and steamed as the coffee loosened every browned bit stuck to the pan. What you got was a dark, reddish gravy with an oily sheen that looked like a bloodshot eye staring back at you. The flavor was bold, salty, bitter, and smoky all at once. Red-eye gravy wasn't meant to drown biscuits. You dipped into it, usually alongside ham and grits, letting that sharp coffee bite wake you up before a hard day's work. Number 4. Chowder beans. Chowder beans were Appalachian winter survival in a bowl. Not quite soup, not quite stew. This dish showed up when the snow piled up, and fresh food was just a memory. Mountain families relied on dried beans because they kept forever and filled bellies cheaply. Great Northern or Navy beans soaked overnight, then simmered all day with a ham bone or a chunk of salt pork for flavor. Here's the trick that made them chowder beans. About halfway through cooking, the cook mashed a big portion of the beans right against the side of the pot. That released starch and turned the broth thick, creamy, and almost luxurious. Some folks splashed in milk or cream if the cow had been generous, plus butter and plenty of black pepper. The result was rich, velvety, and warming in a way only slow-cooked beans can be. Served with corn pone or biscuits, chowder beans could carry a family straight through a cold mountain night. Number 5. Snowball salad. Snowball salad was pure Appalachian potluck energy. Sweet, strange, and proudly homemade, this dish showed up at church dinners, wedding showers, and funeral spreads from the 1930s through the 1960s. And no, it wasn't a salad in any modern sense. It was hillbilly creativity meeting mid-century convenience food. The base was cottage cheese mixed with crushed pineapple, lemon jello powder, and whipped cream or Cool Whip once that hit the shelves. Some cooks tossed in mini marshmallows just because they could. That fluffy mixture got scooped into round balls, then rolled in shredded coconut until they looked like actual snowballs. After a long chill in the icebox, they firmed up just enough to hold their shape. Serving snowball salad meant you were trying to be fancy without breaking the bank. It was sweet, tangy, creamy, and slightly ridiculous, but folks loved it and plates always came back clean. Number 6. Tomato aspic. Tomato aspic was hillbilly elegance in gelatin form. Back in the 1930s through the 1950s, when Jell-O molds meant you were keeping up with the times, tomato aspic was how mountain kitchens showed they could do fancy too. This wasn't sweet Jell-O. This was savory, bold, and unapologetically weird by today's standards. Cooks heated tomato juice with onion, celery, bay leaf, and a splash of Worcestershire, building a deeply seasoned base. Unflavored gelatin was dissolved and stirred in, along with vinegar or lemon juice to give it bite. Sometimes chopped olives or celery were added for texture. The mixture was poured into a ring mold and chilled until firm and jewel bright. Sliced and served on lettuce leaves, the tomato aspic was tangy, slippery, and intense. Folks ate it proudly, convinced this wobbly red mold was the height of sophistication. And for its time, it absolutely was. Number 7. Sardines and crackers. Sardines and crackers were the no-nonsense meal when you were tired, broke, or both. From the 1920s through the 1960s, tins of sardines sat in Appalachian pantries like edible insurance policies. Cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with fat and protein, they didn't need a stove, a skillet, or any fuss. You'd pop that little key, roll the lid back, and get hit with that strong, salty, fishy smell that separated the hungry from the picky real fast. The sardines went straight onto saltine crackers, oil soaking in and softening them up. Some folks mashed the fish into a spread with a fork, adding hot sauce or vinegar for kick. Others ate them whole, bones and all. No shame about it. This wasn't comfort food in the cozy sense. It was fuel, honest, briny, get-you-through-the-day food that kept miners, loggers, and bachelors upright when the cupboards were bare. Number 8. Succotash. Succotash was Appalachian comfort food with ancient roots and garden-fresh swagger. Long before freezers and canned sides, this dish came straight from Native American tradition and settled deep into hillbilly kitchens as a way to stretch the harvest. At its core, succotash was just corn and beans, but mountain cooks knew how to make it sing. Fresh corn got cut straight off the cob, milky and sweet, while lima beans or butter beans simmered until tender. Everything went into a pot with butter or bacon drippings, a splash of milk or cream if you had it, and plenty of salt and black pepper. Some families tossed in tomatoes, onions, or peppers depending on what the garden was giving that week. As it cooked, the corn released starch, turning the whole thing creamy without needing flour. Succotash wasn't flashy, but it was filling, nourishing, and tasted like late summer in the holler. Number 9. Possum pie. Possum pie fooled a lot of folks, starting with the name. There wasn't a scrap of possum in it, and that was the whole joke. This was a layered dessert that played possum, pretending to be something rough and wild, while actually being rich, sweet, and downright indulgent. It showed up across the rural South and Appalachia in the 1950s and 60s, especially at church suppers and holiday gatherings. The base was usually a pecan or graham cracker crust, pressed in and baked until toasty. On top went a thick layer of sweetened cream cheese, whipped smooth and fluffy. Then came chocolate pudding, sometimes homemade, sometimes straight from a box, followed by a cloud of whipped cream or Cool Whip. Chilled until firm, possum pie sliced into tall, dramatic wedges. Folks laughed at the name, then went back for seconds. It was hillbilly humor wrapped in pure dessert luxury. Number 10. Pepperoni rolls. Pepperoni rolls are a straight-up West Virginia legend. Born in coal country in the 1920s, this wasn't snack food. It was survival food built for miners working brutal shifts underground. Italian immigrant bakers figured out that pepperoni's salt and oil acted like natural preservatives. Wrap it in bread, bake it tight, and suddenly you have a meal that wouldn't spoil in a hot, dusty mine. The method was simple, but genius. Soft white bread dough got wrapped around a whole stick of pepperoni, sometimes with a little mozzarella tucked in if you were feeling fancy. As it baked, the pepperoni released its spicy oil into the dough, flavoring every bite. Miners ate these cold, straight from their lunch pails, washing them down with black coffee. No plates, no mess, no refrigeration needed. Today, they're a regional pride food. But back then, pepperoni rolls were just how working folks stayed fed when quitting wasn't an option.
Number 11.
Soup beans and cornbread. If there was one meal that held Appalachian families together, it was this one. Soup beans and cornbread. A pot of dried pinto beans, slow cooked for hours until the water turned thick and rich. If there was a ham bone or a bit of fat back, it went in early, flavoring everything. If not, you made do without it. Because this meal wasn't about perfection, it was about making something out of almost nothing. Cornbread sat beside it, not as a side, but as part of the meal itself. Crumbled into the beans, soaked in the broth, filling enough to keep you going. This wasn't quick food. It stayed on the stove most of the day, feeding anyone who walked through the door. And maybe that's why people still remember it. Because it wasn't just cheap, it was dependable.
Number 12.
Dandelion greens with bacon. Most people see dandelions and think one thing: weeds, something to pull out of the yard and throw away. But in the Appalachian hills, those same plants were food. Dandelion greens, picked young before they turned too bitter, brought into the kitchen and cooked down in a pan. A little bacon grease if you had it, sometimes actual bacon if times were good. That bitterness never fully disappeared. It wasn't meant to. Because this dish wasn't about comfort, it was about nourishment. These greens were packed with vitamins, iron, and other things the body needed, especially in places where doctors were far away and store-bought food wasn't an option. So people learned to use what grew around them, to see value where others saw nothing. And over time, something as ordinary as a dandelion became part of dinner, not because it tasted amazing, but because it kept people going.
Number 13.
Poke salad with eggs. This is the kind of dish that sounds simple until you realize it could make you sick if you didn't know exactly what you were doing. Poke salad with eggs. Pokeweed grows wild across the Appalachian hills, easy to find, completely free, and dangerous. The roots and berries are toxic. Even the leaves can be harmful if they're not prepared the right way. So people learned. The leaves had to be boiled, then drained, then boiled again. Sometimes more than once. Every round, pulling out what could hurt you. That knowledge wasn't written down. It was passed from one generation to the next, quietly, carefully. Once it was safe, the greens were fried with eggs or a bit of bacon grease. Slightly bitter, earthy, filling. To an outsider, it might seem like too much effort for a wild plant. But when food was scarce, knowing how to turn something dangerous into dinner, that wasn't just cooking. That was survival.
Number 14.
Squirrel and dumplings. This is where the menu starts to feel unfamiliar to most people today. Squirrel and dumplings, not something you'd find in a modern kitchen. But in the Appalachian woods, it made perfect sense. Squirrels were everywhere. They didn't need to be raised, fed, or bought. If you had a rifle and a little patience, you had meat. The cooking was slow and deliberate. The meat simmered in a pot until it softened, until it nearly fell off the bone. Then came the dumplings. Simple dough dropped straight into the broth. What came out wasn't fancy, but it was hearty, warm, filling in a way that lasted. And if you closed your eyes, it wouldn't be that different from chicken and dumplings. The only difference was where it came from. Because in those mountains, hunting wasn't a pastime. It was part of putting food on the table.
Number 15.
Onion sandwich. This might be the simplest meal on the entire list, and for some people, the hardest to understand. An onion sandwich. Just thick slices of raw onion placed between two pieces of bread. A pinch of salt. Maybe a little mustard if it was around. No cooking, no preparation, no cost beyond what was already in the kitchen. To modern ears, it sounds extreme, but this wasn't about taste. It was about reality. There were days when time was short, money was tighter, and you still had to put something on the table. And this did the job. Sharp, strong, filling enough to get through the day. It's easy to look back and see only hardship in a meal like this. But for the people who lived it, there was something else there too. A quiet determination. Because even with almost nothing, they still found a way to eat.
Number 16.
Rabbit stew. Before supermarkets made meat easy, it had to be found, raised, or caught. And rabbit was one of the most practical choices. Rabbit stew wasn't fancy, it didn't need to be. Wild rabbits could be hunted, and some families kept them in small backyard hutches. They didn't take much space, didn't eat much, and reproduced quickly. That made them reliable. The meat went into a pot with whatever was on hand: potatoes, onions, maybe a few carrots or root vegetables from the garden. Then it all simmered, slowly, until everything softened and blended together. A single rabbit didn't look like much at first, but after hours in that pot, it turned into something that could feed an entire family. That was the goal. Not abundance, but stretching what you had as far as it could go. Because in those times, making a little feel like enough was its own kind of skill.
Number 17.
Fatback and beans. Most people today have never even heard of it. Fatback. No fancy cut, no lean meat, just a thick layer of pork fat, salted and preserved so it could last. And yet, this was one of the most important ingredients in the entire Appalachian kitchen. Because when you dropped a small piece into a pot of beans, everything changed. As it slowly cooked, the fat melted into the broth, turning plain beans into something rich, something satisfying. Not just food, a real meal. You didn't need much. In fact, you rarely had much. That was the point. Fatback stretched flavor across an entire pot. It made cheap ingredients feel complete. And when money was tight, that mattered more than anything.
Number 18.
Cornbread and milk. Now this one might stop you for a second. Cornbread and milk, that's it. No meat, no vegetables, no seasoning beyond what was already in the bread. Just crumbled cornbread dropped into a bowl and covered with cold milk. To most people today, it sounds like a snack, maybe even something you'd only eat if there was nothing else left. But for thousands of families, this was dinner. Corn was everywhere in Appalachia. It grew well, stored easily, and didn't cost much to produce. Milk, if you had a cow, was just as common. Together, they became something more than simple ingredients. They became a reliable meal, quick to prepare, filling enough to satisfy, and familiar in a way that stuck with people for life. Even now, some remember the exact taste, not because it was special, but because it was always there.
Number 19.
Tomato gravy and biscuits. Most people think gravy needs meat, drippings, fat, something heavy. But in the Appalachian kitchen, you used what the season gave you. And in summer, that meant tomatoes. Tomato gravy and biscuits started with fresh or canned tomatoes, cooked down slowly in a pan. A little flour to thicken it, a bit of fat if you had it, sometimes even a splash of milk to soften the sharpness. What you got was something unexpected, tangy, savory, rich in its own way. Poured over warm biscuits, it turned into a full meal, not a side, not an extra. A meal built almost entirely from the garden and a few pantry staples. It didn't rely on meat. It didn't need to. Because when tomatoes were in season, they carried the whole dish on their own. And for families who learned to cook with what was available, that was more than enough.
Number 20.
Chocolate gravy and biscuits. After all the struggle now and then, something sweet found its way to the table. Chocolate gravy and biscuits. And no, it wasn't what most people imagine when they hear the word gravy. This was cocoa powder, sugar, a little flour, and milk, cooked slowly until it turned into a smooth, rich sauce. Then poured over fresh, hot biscuits. Simple ingredients. But together, it felt like something special. This wasn't everyday food. It couldn't be. Sugar and cocoa weren't always easy to come by, and when they were used carefully. Which is exactly why this dish mattered. It showed up on mornings that felt different. Holidays, gatherings, moments when someone wanted to turn an ordinary day into something worth remembering. Because even in places where life was hard, people still made room for a little sweetness. And sometimes, that's what stayed with you the longest.
Number 21.
Greasy beans. Greasy beans didn't sound fancy, and they weren't trying to be. These were green beans preserved the old-school way, packed raw into jars with nothing but salt and water, then left to ferment slowly in the cellar. No pressure canners, no shortcuts, just time doing its thing. By winter, those beans had turned olive green and funky in the best way. When it was time to eat, the beans got dumped into a pot with fatback or bacon and cooked low and slow for hours. The liquid turned smoky and rich, the beans soft and slick, almost silky. That's why they called them greasy. The flavor was salty, deep, and loud, nothing like fresh green beans. You sopped up the pot liquor with cornbread and called it supper. It wasn't pretty, but it was powerful, and it carried farm families straight through winter. And just like that, those old farm suppers fade back into history.
Number 22.
Fried corn. Fried corn was summer in a cast iron skillet, plain and simple. This wasn't corn on the cob, and it definitely wasn't that sad canned stuff. This was fresh corn, cut straight off the cob at peak sweetness, then scraped down hard to get every drop of that milky goodness. Farm cooks knew that corn milk was where the magic lived. All of it went into a hot skillet with bacon grease. And yeah, usually a little butter too, because why not? It was cooked low and slow, stirred constantly, until the natural sugars caramelized and stuck to the bottom, then got scraped back in. The result was creamy, crispy, sweet, and salty all at once. It tasted like sunshine, hard work, and late summer evenings. Modern creamed corn doesn't even come close.
Number 23.
Country ham and red-eye gravy. Country ham and red-eye gravy were farm food with attitude. That ham wasn't deli meat. It was salt-cured, smoked, and so strong it could wake you up from across the kitchen. Folks would fry a thick slice in a cast-iron skillet till the edges got crispy like meat candy. Then they'd do the magic move. Pour black coffee right into the hot drippings. Yeah, coffee. It would sizzle like a fireworks show, scraping up all those salty browned bits and turning into a thin, dark gravy with a shiny red eye floating on top. Then you'd pour that over biscuits or soak it up with bread, as if it were liquid gold. Bitter, salty, smoky. This meal didn't play nice. It fueled a whole day of farm work and tasted like the 70s in one bite.
Number 24.
Groundhog, woodchuck. Groundhog wasn't a joke meal on the farm. It was a seasonal prize. Late winter was prime time, right before spring, when groundhogs came out of hibernation fat, tender, and loaded with clean, wild flavor. Farmers trapped them in February, and nobody wasted the meat. This was free protein when stores were far and money was tight. First, the meat got parboiled to pull out excess fat, then slow cooked in a Dutch oven with potatoes, onions, carrots, and whatever root veggies survived the cellar. After hours on the stove, the meat turned dark and rich, tasting like a cross between pork and dark meat chicken, but earthier. The fat soaked into the vegetables, making everything taste deep and woodsy. City folks laughed, but farm families knew better. Groundhog ate better than store-bought meat, and it showed on the plate.
Number 25.
Creasy greens. Upland cress. Creasy greens were springtime medicine straight from the creek banks. After months of heavy winter food, farm folks went hunting these peppery little greens like their bodies were begging for it, because they were. Creasy greens grew wild in wet fields and along streams, sharp-smelling and spicy like watercress with an attitude. The cooking was simple because the greens did all the work. They got rinsed, then dropped into a pot with a little fatback or bacon grease and boiled just long enough to wilt. Add salt, pepper, maybe a splash of vinegar, and you're done. The flavor was fresh, biting, and clean, cutting right through all that winter grease. The first pot of creasy greens meant winter was finally losing. On farms, that was something worth celebrating.
Number 26.
Souse meat. Souse meat was farm cooking at its most hardcore. This was the definition of wasting nothing. After hog killing time, when the good cuts were already spoken for, what was left was the head, the feet, the tongue, and all the parts most folks today wouldn't even look at. Farm families took that pile of odds and ends and turned it into something unforgettable. Everything was added to a large pot with vinegar, salt, and pickling spices, then boiled for hours until the meat fell off the bone and the broth thickened into a jelly-like consistency. The meat got chopped fine, mixed back into that tangy liquid, and poured into pans to set up overnight. By morning, you had solid slabs you could slice cold, fry crispy, or eat straight on crackers. Sharp, salty, and punchy enough to wake you up faster than coffee.
Number 27.
Chow chow, pickled relish. Chow chow was the farm pantry's secret weapon. When frost was coming and the garden was on borrowed time, nothing got wasted. Green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, peppers, whatever was left standing, got chopped up and thrown into a vinegar brine loaded with sugar, mustard seed, turmeric, and spice. Then it sat, soaking up attitude. This wasn't sweet pickle relish. This stuff had bite. Sharp, tangy, a little sweet, and loud enough to wake up the blandest plate of food. Folks piled it on beans, cornbread, fried potatoes, greens, honestly, sometimes straight from the jar. Every family swore theirs was best, and arguments over chow chow recipes could last generations. It turned boring winter suppers into something worth sitting down for, and that's why farm kitchens always had a jar ready.
Number 28.
Killed lettuce. Kilt lettuce. Killed lettuce sounded violent, and honestly the cooking method kinda was. This was farm folks' version of a hot salad, long before anyone put warm greens on a menu and charged extra. Fresh spring lettuce just pulled from the ground was torn up and tossed in a bowl. Then came the kill shot. Smoking hot bacon grease poured straight over the leaves. The lettuce wilted instantly, collapsing under the heat while apple cider vinegar hit the grease and sizzled like a warning. Toss in crumbled bacon, green onions, maybe a pinch of sugar if you like balance, and that was it. The greens turned silky, smoky, and tangy, halfway between salad and cooked greens. You ate it fast while it was still warm, sopping up the extra dressing with cornbread. It tasted like winter and spring shaking hands over supper.
Number 29.
Persimmon pudding. Persimmon pudding was farm country dessert royalty, but only if you knew the rules. You didn't touch persimmons until after the first hard frost. Otherwise, they'd pucker your mouth like you'd licked a battery. Once frost sweetened, those little orange fruits were pure gold. Families gathered them by the bucket, squeezed the pulp through cloth, and tossed the bitter skins and seeds without mercy. That thick pulp went into a batter with eggs, buttermilk, flour, sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg, then baked slowly in a pan till the top turned dark and almost burnt. Inside stayed dense, soft, and custardy, somewhere between cake and pudding. The flavor was wild and deep, sweet but earthy, with that unmistakable backwoods fruit funk. Served warm with cream, this wasn't just dessert. It was proof that you knew the land and how to work with it.
Number 30.
Fried salt pork and greens. Fried salt pork and greens were a farmland dinner at its most dependable. Thick slices of salt pork hit a cast iron skillet and fried slowly until the fat rendered out and the edges turned dark and crispy. That grease stayed right where it was, because next came the greens. Collards, turnip greens, mustard greens, whatever was growing outside, got piled into the pan until they wilted down into silky ribbons. A splash of water, lid on, and everything simmered until the greens soaked up that porky flavor. Bitter, salty, rich, and deeply satisfying. Served with cornbread to mop up the pot liquor, this meal kept generations strong on almost nothing.
Number 31.
Hoover stew was the Great Depression's make-it-work dinner, named with pure sarcasm for President Herbert Hoover. When the cupboard was looking tragic, you boiled elbow macaroni, dumped in canned tomatoes, or straight-up ketchup thinned with water, and sliced up hot dogs if you had them. No hot dogs? Some folks just went noodles and tomato and called it a day. It simmered into this red, greasy, stick-to-your-ribs pot that fed everybody without asking questions. Kids remember it like a time machine. One bite and you're back to hand-me-down winners and empty pockets. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fancy, but it was warm, cheap, and it kept a whole farmhouse moving.
Number 32.
Fish head stew. Fish head stew was smart cooking, not desperation. Farming and fishing families knew the best flavor was in the parts everyone else tossed. Big fish heads, cod, salmon, catfish, went straight into a pot with potatoes, onions, and sometimes a chunk of salt pork for fat. As it simmered for hours, the cheeks broke down, the bones released collagen, and the broth turned cloudy, rich, and deeply savory. You'd pick out the big bones before eating, but the rest melted right in. The flavor was strong, no doubt about it, but it was free protein and real nourishment. For river and coastal farms, this stew was common sense in a bowl.
Number 33.
Salt pork with milk gravy. Salt pork with milk gravy was winter survival on a plate. Folks kept slabs of salt-cured pork in barrels because it didn't need a fridge and it didn't quit. Come dinner time, you'd slice it thick, soak it a bit so it wouldn't knock you out with salt, then fry it in a cast iron skillet until the edges got dark and crispy. Now here's the magic. Don't you dare toss that grease. You sprinkle in flour right into the hot drippings, stir it into a golden roux, then pour in fresh milk slow while you whisk like your life depends on it. It turns into a creamy, pepper-speckled gravy that goes over biscuits, potatoes, or plain bread. One pan, big comfort, no waste.
Number 34.
Stone-boiled beef. Stone-boiled beef was frontier cooking stripped down to pure ingenuity. Before metal pots were common, families cooked meat using nothing but hot rocks, water, and patience. You'd dig a shallow pit, line it with an animal hide or wooden trough, and fill it with water and chunks of beef or venison. Then, stones heated red-hot in the fire were dropped one by one, bringing the water to a rolling boil. As stones cooled, they were swapped out for hot ones, keeping the pot bubbling for hours. The meat cooked slowly, turning tender and rich in its own juices. No stove, no cookware, just raw survival smarts doing the job.
Number 35.
Hasty pudding. Hasty pudding was the original fast food, long before drive-thrus and microwaves showed up. When farmers needed something hot and filling right now, they boiled water or milk and slowly stirred in cornmeal until it thickened into a heavy porridge. You had to keep stirring or it'd clump up and scorch, so this was hands-on cooking. If a family had molasses, they'd swirl some in and call it Indian pudding. If not, it was just salt and maybe a knob of butter if times were good. Served steaming hot, it stuck to your ribs and powered hours of fieldwork. Leftovers never went to waste. Once cold, it'd set firm, get sliced, fried in lard, and turn into a whole new dinner the next day.
Number 36.
Mulligan stew. Mulligan stew was pure teamwork in a pot. Born in hard times and hobo camps, it slid right into farmland kitchens when nobody had enough on their own. The rule was simple. Everybody threw in something. Potatoes from one house, onions from another, a can of tomatoes, a carrot or two, maybe a scrap of salt pork or a bone if someone was lucky. It all went into one big pot and simmered for hours. No recipe, no measurements, just hope and hunger. By supper time, it turned into a thick, steamy stew that fed everybody at the table. Mulligan stew wasn't about taste. It was about neighbors surviving together when money was gone.
Number 37.
Brunswick stew. Brunswick stew was slow-cooked patiently in a pot, and every farm family swore theirs was the right one. Originally made with squirrel or rabbit, this stew later shifted to chicken as hunting became more difficult. Meat simmered for hours until it fell clean off the bone, then went back into the pot with corn, lima beans, tomatoes, potatoes, and onions. Everything cooked down thick, somewhere between soup and hash. Black pepper was used in generous amounts, sometimes accompanied by a pinch of cayenne for those who liked a bit of heat. The vegetables softened, the broth turned rich and tangy, and the whole thing tasted better the next day. Served with cornbread, Brunswick stew was a fall dinner at its finest.
Number 38.
Burgoo. Burgoo was farmland cooking on a massive scale. This wasn't dinner for one family, it was dinner for everybody. Originating in Kentucky, burgoo started as a hunter's stew, using whatever meat was around. Squirrel, rabbit, chicken, pork, sometimes even mutton. Everything got browned first, then dumped into a huge iron kettle with corn cut off the cob, lima beans, tomatoes, potatoes, onions, pounds of vegetables at a time. The pot simmered all day, stirred nonstop with a long wooden paddle so it wouldn't scorch. By sundown, burgoo was thick enough to stand a spoon in. It fed church gatherings, harvest crews, and whole towns. Heavy, rich, and unforgettable.
Number 39.
Slumgullion. Slumgullion was the truth of a hard supper. No pretending, no polish. This was the use it or lose it stew when odds and ends were all you had left. A little leftover meat got chopped and browned with onions, then whatever vegetables hadn't gone bad went straight in. Potatoes, canned tomatoes, corn, beans, cabbage, nothing matched, and nobody cared. Water or thin broth was poured in, and the pot simmered until everything softened into one thick, murky stew. Some folks tossed in crushed crackers or stale bread to bulk it up. It didn't look good, but it filled bellies and kept families moving when pride had to take a backseat to survival.
Number 40.
Johnny Cakes. Johnny Cakes were a no-frills breakfast that had been holding it down for generations. Made with stone-ground cornmeal, water or milk, a little flour, and sometimes a touch of molasses, the batter was thick and sturdy. Spoonfuls hit a hot cast-iron skillet and cooked up with a crisp golden crust, while the inside stayed soft and cornbread-like. Folks ate them with butter and honey, or alongside fried eggs and salty country ham. In the early 70s, farmhands loved Johnny Cakes because they filled you up without slowing you down. Simple, dependable, and built for hard mornings.
Number 41.
Cathead biscuits. Cathead biscuits weren't dainty or polite. They were big, rough, and built to fill you up. Named because they were about the size of a grown cat's head, these biscuits were the backbone of Appalachian breakfasts in the early 70s. Cooks mixed flour, lard, buttermilk, and a pinch of baking powder by hand, stopping the second as it came together. Overworking the dough was a sin. Big chunks of dough got dropped straight onto a cast-iron skillet, greased with bacon drippings and baked hot. The bottoms came out crispy, the insides fluffy and layered. Split one open, and it soaked up gravy, butter, or sorghum like a sponge. These weren't trendy comfort food. They were pure working-class fuel.
Number 42.
Fried bologna and egg sandwich. Fried bologna and egg sandwiches were proof that cheap food could still hit hard. Country folks didn't eat bologna cold. They sliced it thick, scored the edges, and dropped it into a hot cast-iron skillet. The bologna puffed up, the edges crisped, and all that salty fat rendered right into the pan. Eggs went straight into that grease, frying until the whites turned lacy and the yolks stayed runny. Then it all got stacked between 2 slices of soft white bread and smashed down so the yolk soaked through. In the early 70s, this was a go-to breakfast, greasy, filling, and perfect fuel before a long day's work.
Number 43.
Red-eye gravy ham biscuits. Red-eye gravy ham biscuits looked wild and tasted even wilder, in the best way. After frying thick slabs of salty country ham in a cast-iron skillet, cooks didn't waste a thing. They poured in strong black coffee to deglaze the pan, scraping up every browned, salty bit stuck to the bottom. The result was a thin, reddish-brown gravy with an oily shine that looked like a bloodshot eye staring back at you. That gravy got poured over split biscuits with extra ham on the side. The flavor was bold, salty, smoky, and slightly bitter from the coffee. Sounds strange, sure, but once you had it, you craved it. In the 70s, this breakfast could keep a man going half the day without thinking about food.
Number 44.
Hot water cornbread was the emergency breakfast. What you made when the pantry was nearly empty. Just cornmeal, boiling water, and salt. That hot water partially cooked the cornmeal before it ever hit the pan, giving it a texture you couldn't fake. Cooks stirred it into a thick paste, shaped small patties, and dropped them into a skillet with sizzling hot fat. If the grease wasn't hot enough, you messed it up. Done right, the outside blistered and turned shatteringly crisp, while the inside stayed moist and soft with pure corn flavor. In the early 70s, Appalachian coal towns showed this up when paychecks were late. Eaten hot, greasy, and fast, it was simple, addictive, and kept you moving.
Number 45.
Hoe cakes. Hoe cakes were breakfast stripped down to the bare essentials, and that was the whole point. Just cornmeal, water or buttermilk, salt, and sometimes an egg if times were good. The name came from cooking them on the flat blade of a hoe over an open fire, though by the 1970s, most folks used a cast iron skillet instead. The trick was getting that skillet smoking hot with bacon grease before the batter hit it. That's how you got those crispy, lacy edges with a tender middle. They cooked fast, crackled when you bit into them, and tasted like pure corn. Farmhands ate them standing up, slathered with butter or a drizzle of sorghum, then headed straight to work. Cheap, filling, and tough enough to last till noon.
Number 46.
Fried cornmeal mush. Fried cornmeal mush was the ultimate comeback breakfast. The night before, cornmeal was cooked with water and salt into a thick, plain porridge, then poured into a pan to set overnight. Come morning, that solid block got sliced thick and dropped into a hot cast-iron skillet swimming in bacon grease. The outside fried up golden and crunchy, while the inside stayed soft and creamy. That contrast was everything. Some folks ate it savory with salt and pepper, or topped it with a fried egg, yolk breaking all over the crust. Others went sweet, pouring sorghum or apple butter on top. In the 1970s, this was pure mountain thrift. No waste, no nonsense. Yesterday's supper turned into today's breakfast, which could keep you full till noon.
Number 47.
Pickled eggs and cornbread. Pickled eggs and cornbread were a lunch that packed a punch without costing much. When chickens were laying heavy, eggs got hard-boiled and dropped into jars of vinegar brine, sometimes plain, sometimes spiked with hot peppers or beet juice. After a few days, those eggs turned firm, sour, and salty, the kind that made your jaw tighten on the first bite. Lunch meant grabbing 2 or 3 of those pickled eggs and a thick chunk of cold cornbread. The sharp vinegar cut straight through the dense cornmeal, making the whole combo sit easily in a hard-working stomach. It was protein, carbs, and grit all in one go. Guys ate it slow, alternating bites, washing it down with creek water or weak coffee, and then got right back to work.
Number 48.
Ham sandwiches on thick sliced bread. Before soft store-bought loaves took over, lunch meant bread you could lean on. These sandwiches started with homemade farm bread, sliced thick, almost an inch, so it wouldn't fall apart by noon. The ham was country ham, salt-cured and smoked until it was tough, ruby red, and packed with flavor. Just one thin slice was enough. By mid-morning, the bread soaked up that salty goodness, seasoning every bite without a single condiment. Some folks smeared a little lard on the bread for moisture, others went dry and proud. This sandwich didn't look fancy, but it did the job. Carbs for energy, protein for muscle, and enough salt to replace what sweat stole during a long, brutal workday.
Number 49.
Salt pork sandwiches. Salt pork sandwiches were the true definition of make it work in tough times. Before refrigeration, families had to get creative with preserving food, and salt pork was the answer. They'd take thick slices of this salt-cured pork, rinse off some of the surface salt, and slap it between two slices of homemade bread. No fancy condiments or toppings, just bread and salty, fatty pork. As the sandwich sat in the lunch pail, that salt would soak into the bread, seasoning every bite, making it flavorful in a way that only a hard-working meal could be. It wasn't about being gourmet. It was about energy and survival. For miners, loggers, and farmers, this sandwich was a meal that helped replace the sweat lost from long shifts. Sure, it was salty, but it did its job, keeping folks going in a world where every bite counted. Simple, but crucial.
Number 50.
Cold biscuits with sorghum. Cold biscuits with sorghum were straight-up working man fuel. No reheating, no fuss. These weren't fluffy diner biscuits either. These were dense, lard-heavy biscuits built to last. By morning, they were cold and firm, which was exactly how folks wanted them. You'd split one open with your hands and drizzle thick, dark sorghum molasses right over the top. That syrup soaked in slowly, leaving sweet pockets all through the biscuit. Sorghum wasn't just cheaper than sugar, it had a deep, earthy bite, with a mineral kick that hit different. Timber workers and factory guys ate these standing up, syrup dripping on their boots, getting a quick sugar rush and long burn energy before grinding through another hard shift. Cheap, sticky, and powerful, this lunch meant business.
Number 51.
Salmon patties. Salmon patties were straight-up proof that canned food could feel like a win. Back in the 1970s, a can of pink salmon was about as fancy as lunch pail protein got, and nobody wasted a single thing. Bones, skin, all of it got mashed up with stale breadcrumbs or leftover cornbread, maybe an egg if there was one, and a little chopped onion. Then those patties hit a hot skillet full of bacon grease and fried until crispy and golden. By morning, they were cold, firm, and perfect for packing. No falling apart, no spoiling, just solid fuel. You ate them with your hands, biting through that crunchy outside into the soft, fishy center. It wasn't gourmet, but it felt rich, and it kept you full till quitting time.
Number 52.
Leather breeches, dried green beans. Leather breeches weren't pants. They were proof you planned ahead. These were green beans strung up on thread and dried until they looked like old strips of leather hanging from rafters all winter long. Come lunchtime, a handful went straight into the pail. No fridge, no worries. Some folks chewed them dry, working their jaw like a machine. Others poured a little hot water over them from a thermos to soften them up. Either way, the flavor was intense, earthy, concentrated, sometimes a little smoky from hanging near the stove. They weren't pretty, but they delivered fiber, minerals, and the kind of staying power fresh vegetables couldn't. To a working man, leather breeches tasted like summer saved for a hard day.
Number 53.
Fried green tomato sandwich. The fried green tomato sandwich was late summer ingenuity slapped between two slices of bread. When frost was coming and tomatoes weren't going to ripen in time, folks sliced those hard green tomatoes thick, dredged them in cornmeal, and fried them in hot bacon grease until golden and crispy. Come morning, those crunchy slices went straight onto soft white bread with a smear of mayonnaise. Nothing fancy, nothing extra. By lunchtime, the sandwich was still holding strong. You bit through that crunchy crust into the tangy, firm tomato with the mayo smoothing it all out. It was sharp, rich, and oddly satisfying. This wasn't just a sandwich. It was proof that nothing went to waste and a garden could still feed you right down to the wire.
Number 54.
Bean sandwiches. Bean sandwiches were what you ate when meat wasn't happening, and nobody apologized for it. Leftover pinto beans from the night before got mashed just enough to spread, still chunky and earthy. That thick bean paste went straight between two slabs of sturdy bread, the kind that could take a beating in a lunch pail without turning to mush. Some folks stirred in a spoon of bacon grease for flavor, others added a slice of raw onion for bite, but plenty kept it plain. Beans brought the protein, bread brought the bulk, and together they stuck to your ribs for hours. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest fuel. To a worker staring down a long shift, this sandwich meant one thing: you weren't going hungry.
Number 55. Sardine sandwich. Open a tin of King Oscar sardines. About 15 cents in 1955. Lay 3 or 4 of those small silvery fish across a slice of buttered rye bread. Add a thin slice of raw onion. A squeeze of fresh lemon. Top it with the second slice and press down just enough to feel the fish give slightly under your palm. That was the sardine sandwich. And it cleared the immediate vicinity of anyone with delicate sensibilities, which was fine because the men eating them had none. Working men in port cities ordered this without apology and without explanation. Baltimore, Boston, Philadelphia. Lunch counters near the docks sold dozens of them before noon. The sardines were briny and rich, the oil soaking into the rye bread until it glistened under the counter lights like something that knew exactly what it was and had no interest in being anything else. The onion was sharp. The lemon cut through the fat. The rye bread held everything together with just enough sourness to make the whole combination feel intentional rather than accidental. A sardine sandwich delivered more protein and calcium per ounce than almost anything else behind that glass counter. Nobody talked about nutrition in 1955. They just knew it was cheap and filling, and it tasted like the ocean on a Tuesday in February when the ocean was the last place anyone wanted to be. Then Americans decided sardines were beneath them. The nutrition didn't change. The fish didn't change. The recipe didn't change. We did. Number 56. Egg salad sandwich. Hard-boiled eggs. Chopped fine with a fork, never a knife. Mixed with Hellmann's mayonnaise, a pinch of salt, a grind of black pepper, and sometimes a whisper of celery salt or a teaspoon of sweet pickle relish that nobody admitted to adding but everybody tasted. Spread thick on white bread. That was the egg salad sandwich. Eggs cost about 60 cents a dozen in 1955. A single sandwich required 2 eggs and cost the counter almost nothing to produce. They sold it for 20 cents and made a profit that kept the lights on through slow Tuesdays and rainy Fridays when nobody wanted to leave the office. The filling was pale yellow, creamy, and mild. It offended absolutely no one. Children ordered it. Grandmothers ordered it. Construction workers ate 2 of them with a bowl of soup and called it a full meal without irony or apology. Egg salad was the Switzerland of the sandwich board. Completely neutral. Universally accepted. The one thing on the menu that nobody argued about because there was nothing to argue about. The counter girl made a full bowl of it every morning. Fresh. By hand. Gone by noon. When lunch counters closed, egg salad retreated to gas station coolers in plastic triangles sealed with a sticker, sitting under fluorescent light for 3 days before anyone touched them. That plastic triangle shares a name with what the counter girl made. It shares nothing else. Number 57. Patty melt. A thin beef patty. Grilled until the edges blackened and the fat rendered into the surface of the meat in small crackling pools. Laid on rye bread with a pile of onions that had been cooking low and slow on the back corner of the same griddle since the morning rush. Swiss cheese melted over the top. The whole thing pressed flat under a heavy spatula until the bread crisped into something halfway between toast and a cracker, and the cheese fused every layer together into a single unified thing. That was the patty melt. And it was better than a hamburger. Better than a grilled cheese. Better than either of them had any right to be separately. The rye bread gave it a depth that a hamburger bun could never match. That slight sourness underneath the beef changed everything. The Swiss cheese had a nuttiness that American cheese lacked entirely. And those onions, the ones that had been going since 6 in the morning, turning from sharp and raw into something sweet and almost jammy. Those onions were the difference between a good sandwich and a sandwich people remembered 40 years later. A patty melt cost about 40 cents. And it was the sandwich that regulars ordered. Not tourists. Not first-timers. Regulars. The ones who had worked through every item on that greased pencil board over months of lunch breaks and landed on the patty melt because nothing else came close, and they had stopped pretending otherwise. It still appears at a few diners. But the original, pressed in on a commercial griddle by a cook who never once consulted a recipe because the recipe lived in their hands, that is nearly gone. Number 4. Liverwurst sandwich. Braunschweiger liverwurst on pumpernickel. A thin smear of yellow mustard. A single slice of raw onion. That was it. And it was magnificent. German, Polish, and Czech immigrants carried this sandwich to factory lunch pails across the industrial Midwest, and it crossed over to every lunch counter within a 10-block radius of every plant, every mill, and every rail yard in America. The liverwurst was smooth and spreadable, richly flavored with liver and pork and spices that had been perfected in European butcher shops over centuries before they ever touched American bread. It was iron in edible form. A quarter-pound cost about 20 cents in 1955. The pumpernickel was dense and dark and slightly sour. The mustard cut through the richness like a clean line. The raw onion added a sharp bite that woke up everything underneath it and made you feel like you had actually eaten something real. Lunch counters in Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh sold liver sandwiches by the hundreds. Butchers sliced it fresh from the log every single morning. It was as common as ham and cheese. Then Americans decided they didn't eat organ meat anymore. No announcement. No farewell. Just a slow collective turning away from anything that reminded people where meat actually came from. The liverwurst sandwich retreated to a handful of German delis. Then it retreated further. Now it's almost gone entirely. And the flavor it carried, that honest, unapologetic richness, went with it. Number 58.
Butter and sugar sandwiches. You ever bite into something so simple it made you feel rich? That's what a butter and sugar sandwich was. 2 slices of white bread, a swipe of real butter, and a sprinkle of sugar that turned struggle into sweetness. This wasn't just a snack. It was a working man's treat, a kid's breakfast, a mama's way of saying, "I got you," when the fridge was looking empty. Elders remember sitting on the porch, holding that sandwich like it was gold, watching the sugar sparkle in the sun. It was soft, sweet, and gone in 3 bites. But the memory stuck around. Some folks toasted the bread, some used margarine. But the feeling? Always the same. It was comfort, it was pride, it was making magic out of nothing. And today, most folks wouldn't even think to make one. But ask your grandma, your uncle, or that neighbor who's been through it. They'll tell you, this sandwich was the truth.
Number 59.
Cornmeal mush sandwich. You ever eat something so humble it made you feel grounded? That's what a cornmeal mush sandwich was. Straight up survival food with soul. Cornmeal mush was cooked thick, chilled overnight till it set like a brick, then sliced and fried golden in a skillet. And when times were lean, folks slapped it between 2 slices of bread, maybe added a smear of mustard or a slice of onion, and called it breakfast. Elders remember it sticking to their ribs before a long day of work. No meat, no cheese, just grit and grease. It was hot, crispy, and full of pride. Some folks sweetened it, some kept it savory, but either way, it was a sandwich that said, "We make do." Today, most folks don't even know what mush is, let alone how to turn it into a meal. But ask your granddaddy, your great-aunt, or that neighbor who still cooks from scratch, they'll tell you. This sandwich was the real deal.
If one of these took you straight back to your grandma's table, drop it in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and we'll keep digging up the meals time tried to forget.